Hello everyone, welcome back to Pommy and Us. I hope we're all doing really well. If you are new around here, please drop a like, please drop a subscribe. It does mean the world to me. We're really smashing out the subs at the moment. The content's heating up. The season is halfway done and we're having a lot of fun. If you are a returning Pommy and Us is the term that everyone has dubbed recently. Good day to you. It's great to have you back. And what we're going to do today is we're going to do... Everyone's doing a mid-season Carlton review. And there's only so often that I can talk about Carlton and, you know, bash my head against the wall. So what I thought I'd do is I've had a bit of a play around. We've had a bit of a intuition this week. And I thought what I'd do is we'd go through just some tactical areas that, you know, I often talk about structurally. And I've got a new program, a new bit of software that I thought we could have a take a look at and have a look at maybe some of the problems and dissect where we are. So the first thing we're going to look at, and let's go straight to it, Carlton's kicking defence. So Carlton's kicking defence is one of the causes of where you actually see our defensive structure come unstuck. You saw it a few times against the Eagles this week, just gone. And I'm going to explain it a bit. So what we've got here is, don't worry about the positions, but what we'll do is roughly, this is the average setup for the Eagles against our kick-ins. So what you'll find here is, here we are, we've got the kick-in, so obviously it's listed as a full-back, but just don't worry about that, just use a bit of imagination. So we've got Adam Sard here. So you find obviously what's going to happen is all these players here are going to really look to try and find space. Now you've got to understand here, from this position, there's two games going on within a game. Now, what we're trying to do, because the majority of the teams in the AFL have a zonal system from this, is... So imagine here, just imagine there's a little aura around them and it's a zone. So the area here around him is, he's guarding that zone, that's his zone. His aim here is whatever comes in this vicinity here, he picks up. So say this is Zach Fisher moves that way, he's going here. If, say, this is Cripps moves here, he's going here, and so on and so forth. Now, you find what happens here is their aim is to do that, and their aim is to really narrow down space, stop any exit ball. Now, what the opposition tend to do with Carlton is trying to pack the corridor. They're trying to protect this area. It's the shortest journey there. And you kind of find quite often what happens is players actually roll away from Carlton, and it creates a space here. Now, we know Carlton love to attack this area down the flank. And that's your panic ball. That is, from a defensive setup, that's your panic ball. Ideally, and you see Carlton do this, we'll chip kick here. And then it starts to break out. And we're trying to encroach our way here. We're trying to encroach. We're trying to edge our way forward. Now, in reality, what kind of happens often is that we get to this position here. There's a bit of pressure. He might take the game on, which invariably you see with Sard. And what we're hoping here is that the half forward here is defending. He's going to be drawn to the ball carrier. We have one out. There's a little handball. There's a little handball here available, and, you know, we're out, and so on and so forth. And Carlton create this wonderful one-out situation, which we do see a lot of our goals scored. It comes into this position, goes into there. Harry's very phenomenal at it. However, what you do find here is that the pressure comes quite hard from these teams, and Carlton get drawn into kind of defending the press almost. And you find two things happen. We saw that panic kick earlier in the week against it, and then the ball was smothered. It falls out here and it's an easy goal. Or what you do see is this bomb kick here. Now, this comes into our midfield turnover. Say we take this here, and we'll get some just rough positions here of how the players might look when the ball's here. So say it gets to this position here, and this is just a rough analogy. Say it's here with, quite invariably, it'll be here, you know, your Levi Casbolts take that ball and so on and so forth. Usually it's a tall, it could be the ruck even, but usually we've got the outlet ball, we're out. Now, from this position, you also see this in free-flowing football from Carlton. We look to try and hit up here. Now, when there's a lot of movement and the boys are really pushing, they're breaking the zone, they're finding the gaps, and that is key to beating a zone, finding the gaps. what you find is that Carlton sometimes, you know, start to get into a bit of trouble. We kick sideways, and if this kick here, this outlet kick here to get us inside 50 isn't quite right and it's turned over, you find something really interesting happen, and this is where you will find Stocker was vulnerable. And what you'll find here, say this is Liam Ryan and say this is Liam Stocker, what you'll find here is their half forwards tend to run towards the ball carrier. Now, what that does is your forward pocket here now has a bit of space here to run into. You can see here that the opposition has got the ball. And our zone, and like all zonal systems, it requires great commitment and it creates great communication. Now, one of the great skill sets to beat this, and you see the Melbourne and the Doggies do this well, is that they'll use their smaller forwards to kind of drop into where the midfield would pick up. Now, what this does is here, say you've got Setterfield here, he sees this. He sees this little run. And Setterfield then's eyes off the ball. Cripper here might see this little move and see that, and it creates these little pockets of space where you see these chip kicks come in. Bang, bang, and before you know it, chaos has assumed, chaos has roamed, and it's an easy hit up there to say Liam Ryan, to say Jamie Cripps, and XYZ, and it's bang a goal. Now, how do you fix that? Now, that is really hard to fix, because what you've got to do here is you've kind of got to shelve the zonal system, because the zonal system really does rely heavily on players understanding, one, their role, B, defence, and C, how opposition look to break that. And it is really hard for, say, a Liam Stocker to do that, who is a natural inside midfielder, because, again, under pressure, Liam Stocker quite often was found coming centrally and leaving this space here behind him for their wings to exploit, for the forward pockets here to really move into. You've got the forward pocket here had room to run into when the ball, say, was in this position here. And what that does there is it just creates that outlet ball behind you. And you find it quite often with Carlton, particularly down them pockets. There's them little outnumbers, particularly down the half-forward flank. And really hard to fix, but one of the things that you go about in this system is, if we bring them back to, say, a decent starting point, is you want them kind of looking like this. You want them to really be active, committing to a one-on-one contest. So if this happens here, and say you saw this move as well, Gaff did this quite often, the overlapping run, and a player is drawn to him, and you can see here he's coming now into that encroachment area of your centre half back, and what you've got to do there is be really committed and have them calls switched so that happens. And it's very important that when that switch comes, because it quite often works like this. If the centre half forward is roaming here, and Cripper, say, is going with him, and Gaff then, say, comes here, you find that you get this mismatch, that you've got maybe, say, Stocker is now on a bigger body, and that's creating that mismatch, because then suddenly you've got a centre half forward, say, maybe on Setterfield, and before you know it, it breaks down. So one of the things there really to look for Carlton moving forward, and structurally, is what would help them, is maybe adopting the pattern that, say, Melbourne have. So Melbourne quite often, and why it really works well for Melbourne, let's get that play here. So now they play the ruckman as a loose man behind, and he often occupies, if you look at Mitch McGovern, if you look at Max Gawn, he occupies this role here. So he's kind of almost like the backstop. Now, it works two ways for them. What that does there is, because he's so tall, if they look for this dangerous kick, and that's what they're looking for the centre half forward to lead and get there. They're looking for someone in this position here to be that next kick, or they're looking for someone here, the wingman, to come here and be that next kick. Is he will peel off and he will intercept that. Now, this is where Carlton get hurt in transition, and we're going to flip it now and imagine that what people do to us is what they do to us. So you've got here, he's taken the intercept mark, and then what you're looking for is Carlton to use their tools. Now, invariably what Carlton do from this position, and again causing a turnover, is we start to kick. We're starting to look for this corridor kick. That comes off really well. Players start streaming forward as so, and we create these gaps. Now, Carlton invariably look to kick. What we want to do, and what opposition do, and you see Salem does this a lot, and this is where you'd look at Adam Sard, is you're getting these pathways of runs, and they look for, we run really kind of horizontally almost. You look at the top teams, they're running in intersects, they're running kind of like these patterns diagonally, and what they do is they intersect each other, and that causes chaos. As you can see there, it's causing chaos in a defensive structure. And then we get the handball here, and you see it happens quite often with Carlton, not enough in my opinion, that suddenly Sard is through here, and now what you're doing is you're getting their defenders to commit to this run. They have to react to it, and then you get the nice sweet one out, bang, you find Harry Mackay there, and it's a goal. And it's really important there that you're looking at intersect runs. A lot of defensive work is the same as aggressing work, and it's the same that why Carlton lead the way in midfield turnovers resulting in goal. Because when you play this zonal system, invariably they're running really hard ahead of the ball, trying to get ahead of their man. When that turns around, you have space galore. So let's just say here, let's bring it back. Say they've managed to slow us up a little bit inside 50. So let's just say here that we've got the half forward has got it here, and Carlton are starting to have streamed forward. They're a little bit out of position, but that's okay. We've got ourselves kind of back into a defensive set. So you can see here, this is more of a Carlton when we're in aggressive position, and this is one of the places where we do turn it over, that half forward midfield here. Now, you find what they do really well and what Carlton attempt to do, but our pressure acts and tackles show we're not quite there yet, is you're looking to really make this kick hard. You don't want, the last thing you want is the old classic forward pocket here, Betts runs here, creates this space, these two get confused, easy kick up, easy hit up there into the full forward position where Mackay's made a lead, and that's where he gets the majority of his goals. But say now here that they spoil this, they get it on the ground. Now what you find here is it's short kicks that kill us. So they'll kick back here, they'll kick back here, and before you know it, Carlton get really caught up because they play a really high defensive press. That, like we're talking about that defensive press, it's the art of finding space versus the art of cutting off space. You do that via dummy runs, is that we create these one-outs all around the ground, and they utilise the short handball chains and the short kicks to kind of dissect Carlton. And that's where it goes wrong. When you look at us defensively and structurally, that's why the short kicks hurt us, because it creates that indecision. You've got to remember that in these positions here, these players in their mind aren't defending this guy, they're defending this space. So if you're short kicking up and you've got them wonderful little moments, it's creating them areas for you to be dragged. Is Setterfield on that guy, or is he now running into mine and he's going to pick up mine? And it's a real easy method to break down, but it's one that requires great discipline. And they're two areas really, I think, that Carlton struggle. The other area that we're going to look at is stoppages. So now the art of the stoppage, and let's look at a centre clearance. This is where Carlton really do struggle in my opinion, because what they invariably do is they kick this very quickly. They try and get it inside 50 at all costs. Now, when you find the top teams who are dominating, what they're doing is you've kind of almost got to imagine that it's kind of like a nomination. One player of the opposition in these ruck taps will be nominated as the guy that is going to be hit to advantage. Now, Carlton invariably don't really mix it up. What we do is we drop it here, and what we're looking for is we're really looking for either a quick kick forward. We're hoping that our centre half forward really comes towards the ball and takes that, or what Carlton are looking for is kind of trying to get this centre here free and get that little handball to him and hopefully get out wide. Carlton like to go wide, if anything, from this position and really look to get the game going by hand and foot. Now, genuinely what you find is that they play their centreman kind of in a more defensive role, kind of stopping that space to run into. And what you find happens here is, again, the defensive structure comes, because you find, especially when we get the on-goal runs, is you find that our wings almost get drawn to the ball. And that is because usually we get peppered through the corridor on these positions. If we don't win it, something usually develops. And you find quite often if that happens, these wings here start to peel off slowly from their man, and they kind of, it's like a little game almost. And you find quite often that it'll be this little handball, and you'll find that it's almost like a quarterback handball to the centreman, who's kind of usually unaided, and he looks to chip it here, and then the stream goes on. You find it quite often. It happened a few times against the Eagles that he's out of position, and before you know it, chaos breaks down because it almost works out like a 7 versus 5 from this position. And that's again something that Carlton can look at structurally, and for me, that's where you start to look at the personnel that are inside of your centre clearances and your stoppages, and this happens around the ground as well. What you're looking for is you really want a runner here, and this is why I think they spent a bit of money on Zach Williams and Sam Walsh, and that's where you're wanting to try and free Sam Walsh up. And you look at something that Brisbane do really smartly. They often utilise their centre-man in a very peculiar way, and Melbourne do it as well. They're looking at it to kind of stop this blockage of run here, and they're trying to let their Sam Walsh, they're trying to let their players with a bit of pace and pizzazz have this area here to run through. So the ball comes down and he's off and away. And then invariably what you find is their wingman, Ed Langdon, particularly for Melbourne, they're intersecting back into the corridor, so there is a handball or a kick. And that is very tough to defend. And that is another way that Carlton could maybe look at. If I was coach, I would be looking at it. Now, for me, that's all well and good. That's all well and good for me to say. But I also think that the makeup of the side is wrong. So let's just have a look, if Coach Pom was here, what you'd be looking at on the role. Now, this is the team that, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the dynamics that I think that Carlton should employ. So, now, I think when you pick a team, what you need to do, and I think as a coach, and I think regardless of what ball sport we're looking at, you've got to look at the personnel that you have at your disposal. And you've got to look at their skill sets, and then you build a game plan around the skill sets. And then from that, you add layers to it. So, for me, this side isn't a crash-hot kicking side, and the fact that our game plan relies solely on the kick, for me, is an alarming system. So let's have a look at the team I've picked, and I will explain it why. Now, I'm a firm believer that if you want to build team unity, you've got to create reasons for that unity. And one of the most ancient tricks in the book in sport is to define and create a symbiotic relationship with parts of the ground. So by that, I'm going to pick on 2 players here. Now, Lockie O'Brien, I'll look at that wing position, and I think that that wing position is probably a weakness for Carlton because there isn't probably some natural talent to play there. And I'm not a firm believer in changing someone's role. I believe what you're born to do is what you're born to do. So the reason that Lockie O'Brien is there, I'll look at the skill sets that he's got. He's got a decent long kick, and that is going to help us because we've got Curnow to come back. TDK in this team at the moment would be my centre-half forward, and Mackay, and both of them are very good at leading, and if you can get them one out with an early entry, you're going to be fine. They've also got natural big engines to play this role, and that is a very key thing when you play in the wing. It's got to be in that position. I'd like to float Fisher through there. He would be on my interchange bench, but for me, that's where you're looking for. Now, what I would do here is Parks here, his defensive work, O'Brien isn't great. Parks' role here is really to behave like Gary Neville and David Beckham for Man United. His role is to really be that backstop, to allow Noah O'Brien, maybe he'll go at 65, 70% and maybe stick 50, 60, 70% of his tackles. These 2 here, Williams and Parks, real gritty footballers. This is where I've got my defensive protection. Now, Parks, his job here would be purely lockdown, the same as Plowman. He is really been as a backstop. I don't want anything aggressive from these. And their movement, for me, when they do have the ball, is looking to handball to intersecting runs from my 2 pacey guys. These 2 here will be looking to intersect at any point of time, and I would be employing a more handball-heavy game. When in doubt, handball and working pairs. So I would be looking for these 2 here to really look for the handball and really take the game on by pace. Because twofold, when you handball, you can move up a lot more, kind of like this. Imagine blocks of 6. When you handball, you can have someone running forward and slotting in that position. So if Saad here got to this position, Doc's job here would be to look at that defensive midfield role. Same with O'Brien, same with Williams, trying to really make sure that you've got that passage of play. Now in the midfield, I'd say when Colonel comes back, TDK would be here. But my followers have actually gone with Stocker. Now Stocker and Kerner would be interchangeable here. But I think both of them have the same skill set. Both of them are very good with the handball. Both of them are very good at locking a player down and a bit of grit and determination. And for me, I'd have Cripps as my centre man. Now I'll tell you for why. I would be getting him to deploy that role to act as basically the stopper, because you're always the spare in a stoppage as a centre man. And looking to be a blocker so these guys can run through and really get some zip, some pace through there. I think Cripper's best work now is as the complement, as the complementary for that midfield to really get that injection. He's a very smart handballer as well, Cripps, and that's what it is. And I think the forward line speaks for itself. Modern day football is built around pressure. I like what Fogg and I like what Martin do. Betts is probably the best available at the moment, given his age as well, and always brings a little bit of tackle pressure there. And I would see that as a really good role. I'd have Fisher, I'd have Kerner on my Pine. I'd also have Fisher, Kerner on the Pine, and I'd complement that as well. And probably for me, if I was going to complement that, I'd have someone like Jackie Noons and Josh Honey in there, because Noons gives you that versatility. He's probably not best 22, but you want that extra thing there. And then there's a great argument for creating a matchup based on who you are playing. So if you were playing maybe a slower side like a Hawks, you might look for Dow. And that is where I'd be looking at. And through the rest of the season, what I would be looking at if I was coaching coming in today is I need a replacement for Betts. Maybe that's Honey. Stocker, maybe there's an argument there for Dow to come in. Maybe there's an argument as well to maybe shift Walsh back onto the wing like he did so well and rotate maybe a Dow on the ball and then present him like he did at half forward in the fourth quarter with a bit of success there. But I think that's where, for me, I'd be looking at that tactics. So my tactics basically will be built around this side is quick. This side plays more on a synergy, and your defence has got to be really responsible and really looking kind of like a netball side is where I would look for Carlton, where they operate in a zone and that's all they do. And if you created zones around the ground, this quadrant here is purely ploughman's, that creates less confusion because they've also got to pick up the number as well as that. So you've got to look at that. Have that netball mindset of you always come across the same person and you work in a zone, but also mark the number. But that is where I see it going wrong for Carlton. I know this has been a long video. I hope it opens the doors a little bit and a bit of an explanation for you. Let me know what you think, and until next time, Pommy out.